Hello and welcome to another episode of the O3C podcast, coming to you from O3C Games. My name is Jonathan Dunn and I'm joined by my wonderful, wonderful good friend and bespectacled bearded man, Chris Dow. Hello! And we're going around the world in 80 games. Yeah. Hello! Do you like this show? Share it on your social media platforms, please. Find us on ours at O3C Games on everything that's not fascist, and visit our website to join our Discord. O3C.games is our website. If you go to the support page, you can also find some other ways to help us out by throwing us a few quid, which I honestly say is very essential and goes a very, very long way in helping the show and my life continue. Oh, Chris, we're back.
Yes, we are.
I think I speak for everyone when I say thank all that is fuck that January is in the goddamn fucking bin.
Yes, we are. Yes,
dreadful month, absolutely gopping, and it felt like a particularly bleak January this year, not because of anything that's happened, although so many bleak things have happened, but it's all just felt extra trench, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely awful. Anyway, it's behind us now. February's here, and Austrian fields lie before us in the distance.
Beautiful.
I'm looking forward to making our first Around the World in 80 Games stop of 2025, but we've got a bit to catch up on first, haven't we? 2 months of gaming since we haven't checked in properly since the beginning of December. But well, we should start in the place that's probably occupying the headline slot in gaming news around the world. That is with the reveal of the Nintendo Switch 2.
Oh, excited! Are you?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was easy, wasn't it?
Yeah, there we go. I mean, there's really not much to say about what's been revealed about the Switch 2 because we knew 99% of it already from all of the leaky leaks in the industry kitchen. And I don't think there's any concrete reveals in this reveal video that came as any sort of surprise at all. Even like the tease of mouse functionality of the Joy-Cons is something we'd already heard a rumbling of and obviously haven't even had confirmation of it. The seeming confirmation of a Mario Kart 9 is something that's also been all but confirmed too. I like the look of the console. I think it's smart and sleek and looks less toy-like than the original Switch, even though the little fold-out kickstand looks a bit flimsy. But I like the idea of like the clickable mag-safe Joy-Cons, especially as someone who had to fork out to repair the sliding Joy-Con slide slot on my OLED Switch fairly recently. Mouse functionality could be cool, but I mean, I suppose I'll only play with the Joy-Cons attached to my console. If I'm not doing that, I'm going to use the Pro Controller. That's what I've always done. I've always been a bit, begrudged to have to do any sort of waggling.
The potential benefit, I guess, is when I was looking before for a controller to use with my Steam Deck setup that could kind of mimic mouse controls, and I went for the Steam controller itself, works really nicely with the little touchpad thing. It could work for games like that, but because the Switch 2 is still a console, it's not a PC handheld in the same way Steam Deck is, it's not that important either. So unless Nintendo were like, bring back Mario Paint, like day one, it's going to need something to make that make sense. But, who's
Mario
to say
Maker?
At the moment? Yeah, I mean, stuff like that would work a lot better.
Any real-time strategy game.
Yeah, one of the big changes, I suppose, was going from Mario Maker on the Wii U that had a touchpad and was much easier to make levels on versus the Switch, where it was fine, but it just felt a little bit less good.
Yeah.
But yeah, things like that could be interesting. My biggest takeaway was obviously I knew I was going to buy a Switch 2 when they came out anyway. That, it doesn't really matter what the cost is. I will be queuing up, as it were, digitally to buy one. But it did say in this teaser trailer, we're going to play old cartridges. And that was a really, really big deal. Yeah. And I think it's good that they got ahead of that enough to properly confirm it in what was a teaser trailer that didn't need that information. Yeah. No one was clamoring at that stage outside of saying, oh, it's official. Here's the thing. It's flying around and everything else. To actually have the only page of information was just to say, like, don't worry, lads. Yeah. The games on your shelf are going to work unless it's something like Ring Fit Adventure where you need to have it wrapped around your leg. Yeah. It seems like everything else will be fine. And even then, it wouldn't surprise me if it supports old Joy-Cons, just not kind of attached. They could still be kind of a separate, loose peripheral, as it were, that you could use as a control option. So we really know nothing.
We know nothing.
We know nothing. And it's
nothing.
not until April the 2nd, I think, is the big direct that will announce it properly.
It's sensible that they pushed that a day later than what they could have done. That just would have been chaos, wouldn't it? Absolute chaos.
Lean into it, bung it on April 1st. Although because of that...
Who was it that did that? That just shadow dropped something on April 1st, not as an April Fool's joke, but it just...
I can't remember. That is
something though, wasn't there?
There was like a weirdly vivid memory, and it was a gaming-related thing, and it was the first, but I don't recall. I can't think what it was.
I don't know.
But it does mean, because the direct is on the 2nd, we'll have a lot of fake news come out on the 1st as potential leaks for the 2nd.
That is a very good point,
so
actually.
I would recommend anyone interested in the Switch just log off for a day.
Yeah.
just turn up to the proper video and just be done with it.
Yeah. I think Mario Kart 9 isn't something I'm actually that excited about. I think Mario Kart 8 is the peak of where that series can be. Certainly, I agree. Certainly graphically, but it looks like maybe Mario Kart 9 will push the races to 24 characters as a showy-offy thing. The track they showed looked pretty big, maybe even open world Forza Horizon big, maybe. I don't know, but the redesign of some of the character models made it look like it was going to hark back to the original SNES Mario Kart. The new the new old Donkey Kong design has made me so happy. I absolutely love that. I've got
Big fat oaf Donkey Kong.
I love it. But unless they've really got something to set it apart from Mario Kart 8 that is enticing, I'm not going to be overly excited. Obviously, I'll pick it up at launch if it is a launch title, which probably will be. But then I also bought 1-2 Switch at launch too. And also that dreadful 3D Snake game on the eShop because there was nothing else to play.
Yeah, Snake Pass, I think it's called.
Snake Pass? It was barely Snake Passable. Roll on April and the proper reveal, says I.
Yeah, I'm up for it. I'm excited. Let's see where we go.
So what have you played, Chris, in the last couple of months? What occupied your face over Christmas and the last few weeks?
The game that I have sunk the most time into during the last 2 months has absolutely been the Gameloft-developed kart racer Disney SPEEDSTORM. By some margin, and up front I'm going to state two quite important things about this. Number one, this is the bit that will make you go, oh, it's probably the best feeling kart racer since Mario Kart. You know, we've just been talking about Mario Kart 8 as the pinnacle of that kind of franchise, the pinnacle of that kind of genre. This feels as close to that as you can do in terms of handling. It's a very good controlling kart racing game, very fun to play. But number two, it's also probably the most egregiously monetized and predatory free-to-play game I've ever come across.
No.
And I will mention a bit later why that's such a big problem, especially for someone like yourself that I know, have really struggles with that sort of model. But I've now played the game for probably 50, 60 hours. And I've thoroughly enjoyed basically my entire playtime, but I can't help but step back and think about everything from its general setup, its design, from the intro to the menus, through racing, post-game, all of it. It's just set up to try and wring money out of impressionable kids, out of Disney adults, or anyone that struggles with kind of FOMO when it comes to live service games. So it is really heavy in a way that I haven't played enough free-to-play games to say whether this is the norm, but if it is, that's even more terrifying than me just seeing it in one particular example. So if I say the good stuff first, as I mentioned, the driving feels really good. The drifting, the boosting, the dashing, the barging, the grinding, all the different things you can do, it is really best in class. And that's not me exaggerating. It's very good. It borrows from a lot of different kart racing games, but takes the good stuff from all of them. So it's got the boost system that's kind of more from Crash Team Racing. It's got the general drifting and all-terrain racing, like underwater, through the sky, and everything from Mario Kart. It even takes elements from Chocobo GP's power-up system. So all the things I like are here. And it feels really solid because it's drawing from the best to ever do it, basically. Yeah. It's saying, who else did this well? What can we take from that? And how can we maybe just tweak it a bit so it suits these characters in this world? The tracks are really visually varied. They look great. They're thoughtfully planned as actual raceways. They draw from a whole range of Disney IPs that makes them feel properly fantastical. So there's proper set-piece moments. You're leaping into the Cave of Wonder from Aladdin. You're drifting around a pirate ship that's under siege from Pirates of the Caribbean. There's some proper kind of exciting filmic stuff here. And again, it rivals much of the best from Mario Kart's recent offerings of thunderstorms going off as you drive through the sky and stuff like that. It feels really good. another really nice thing, it pulls from Chocobo the way that that game has a limited number of tracks, but lots of track layouts within those track sort of setups. So you might have like a single Little Mermaid track, but you can race it 7-8 different ways kind of thing. So you don't get bored of the actual racing itself, even if the visuals seem familiar. It means that, you might be racing through Riley's mind from Inside Out again, but it doesn't matter because you're seeing new things, or you're getting used to a new configuration or new twists and turns, whatever. The music, which is actually what led me to the game in the first place, is absolutely bananas. Like someone I follow on Blue Sky, chazhodges.bsky.social, if you want to hit me up over there, because I've left Twitter entirely, so that's where I live now. The music is entirely comprised of truly unhinged, I would say, drum and bass or Eurodance remixes of Disney classics.
Incredible.
So it's
I'm downloading it now.
It's things like You've Got a Friend in Me, but dubstep, or Do You Want to Build a Snowman, but it's got like a 4 to the floor kind of like dance beat donk on it.
Incredible.
It's so stupid, but it's never not enjoyable. And there are so many songs in it. There are so many songs on this playlist. A more functional positive as well, and this is something that in the right hands I think is really nice, is that if you just want a game to play that's strictly couch multiplayer, you're absolutely sorted, because if you're playing offline, either single player or with friends and family on your couch, you can access every track, every player. It's just a racing game you can play for free. And I think that in itself is a nice, generous thing. So if you just want a casual game to play, you're a bit bored of Mario Kart, you want something similar, and you want to race around as some familiar characters, it's there, everything's there, just enjoy it. The free-to-play game, though, the meat and potatoes, the money side of it all. Oh. Thankfully, play itself, outside of like the odd daily events, are never energy bound, because that's another big worry with these sort of games. You can basically take part in all content, all online races, everything like that, until your heart's content, and there is a lot to do. Like, I've never picked up the game and got to a point where I'm like, there's nothing left for me to play. There is stuff to do as long as you want to do it. There's endlessly refreshing seasons of events and races. You can do each event multiple times if you want different rewards, whatever. You can keep going forever. The entire game, though, is built around, like I mentioned up top, generating a sense of FOMO, not only for specific characters and cosmetics, but also for character level and the power that lets you actually compete online or even beat some of the later single-player content that I've mentioned already. And that's not so cool. Even less cool, there are multiple currencies to track, as is common to this sort of game. So you need, I'm going to try and get this right, racer shards, which allow you to unlock specific characters, upgrade points, which allow you to boost any of your roster if they have enough character shards from the first bit, season coins, which allow you to open loot boxes, tokens, which allow premium purchases and premium loot boxes, seasonal coins, which allow you to open seasonally specific loot boxes, multiplayer coins, which allow you to open loot boxes that center entirely around multiplayer icons or slogans and God knows whatever else. It's a lot. And on top of all this, there are so many different bars to fill and level that it took me probably the first few hours of playing to understand what I was doing, what was progressing, what I was achieving, what I was feeding into, and where I was supposed to be spending any time even. So it's not a game that's like, do this first and then you'll get a feel for what comes next. It's just a constant assault to know, what does this currency do? Who am I improving? What's this experience going towards? And it's a real just mishmash, like a shotgun blast of stuff in your face all the time. Every single character has their own power level and their own multiplayer level. Each support character has their own power level. You have a collective multiplayer level that combines multiplayer progress across all currently unlocked characters. You have a collection level that keeps track of how much you've unlocked across the whole game. You have a season pass level that dishes out rewards based on how many seasonally specific things, goals, events you've completed. There's almost certainly more, but the early game is such an assault, like I said, on your senses after each race, desperately trying to drown you in just as much dopamine as possible, that you will either quit cold turkey after just a race, or you'll need to go and have a break for well-needed sensory regulation before you come back. Or, the most worrying one, you find yourself addicted to the loop of it all, and then you're suddenly desperate to spend 80 real-world pounds to unlock Baloo from the Jungle Book, or something like that. Because this is what it does. It's like you start logging on, and it's like, there's a deal on, and you go, okay, I don't need the deal. And it's like, we'll show it to you anyway. And then it pops up, and it's like, the witch from Snow White. she's £100 if you buy her now. And it's like, this is mad. This is absolutely mad. And for me, someone who has no Disney affiliation, like I said back when I was playing Dreamlight Valley, I don't care. I'm not a Disney person. I've avoided the draw to drain my wallet at all because I don't care who I'm racing as. I'm just enjoying the racing. So, I've actively played for close to 50, 60 hours. In that time, the only money I've spent is for a season pass that was £7 to let you access the stuff you unlock from that season. And that sort of value feels fine because I've definitely played for more than £7 of game. That feels okay. I do feel, though, that this is probably the minimum you can spend if playing regularly to make your experience not feel like a waste of time. Because, again, so much of the game is like you're closing welcome pop-ups or post-race reward screens that are saying, this is what you could win, this is what you could get, this is what you could unlock if you were just paying a little bit more. And for someone that is easily drawn into that, I think that can be really dangerous. Because it's bits like, if you break your multiplayer streak of wins, it's like, a few tokens, we can sort that out for you. Call it a quid. We'll keep that multiplayer safe. And again, maybe in the moment for some people, if you've got a big streak, you go, it's just a quid, isn't it? But I think it's a very slippery slope to start being like, it's just another quid. It's just a tenner. Just 20 quid. I've only spent 40 this month on that, and it really does add up. And it's other stuff like it's saying, do you want to do that race? You do actually need Steamboat Mickey for that. And then you go, okay, I'll do something else. And it's like, but Steamboat Mickey's only £20. Do you want to give us £20? Because then you could do this race. And it's relentless. It's really, really relentless.
That sounds horrible.
And this part is. And it's just, I think it's even grubbier, though, than a lot of free-to-play stuff because there's an inherent cynicism in building a game like this around massively popular IP like Disney.
Yeah.
So once more, for those at the back, I'm not a Disney adult, as I mentioned. But if I were the type of person who is obsessed with Nightmare Before Christmas or Frozen or something like that, the amount of real-world cash the game allows you to spend on unlocking, dressing up, then leveling up, say, Jack Skellington or Elsa is quite worrying, I think. And what is really frustrating to me is knowing that deep down, I can't recommend a game like this because its monetization absolutely torpedoes what is otherwise one of the best kart racing games I've played. And that's really miserable because it's like in the here and now of the few minute races you're doing, it feels great. And it's only when you jump back to the menus, just like, oh, fuck, we're here again. And I think if you're a parent with kids who are into Disney, do not install it. If you're an adult that finds it a bit easy to get wild with digital spending, Jonathan Dunn, I'd steer clear as well. If you want a party game and you can sort of blinker out the klaxon and ticker tape menus, there's good stuff there. Because like I said, you can just play it for free indefinitely if you're just playing offline races with your friends and pals. And if you're uninterested in Disney full stop like me, you can probably play enough to kind of get underneath the capitalist wrapping. But it's very much a game of two halves. And the reason I've spent the time really pulling apart the tendrils of how this thing ticks is because if you're uninformed, you could get really bitten here. So it's a game I'll say, for what it is, I enjoy racing around tracks. It's fun to go, I've unlocked someone organically with no money. It's just taking a little bit of time. But you can't recommend it for someone that's going to go, they just might subscribe, actually. I might just give them a few pounds. I might just, it's too much. It's too much. So it is what it is. It's a game that I'm enjoying, but it's a game that I cannot recommend really to anyone.
It's a shame. It's a shame because I would like, honest, I would happily pay £70 to buy that game.
I would completely because I would get my money's worth from it, and knowing that there was kind of like a content map that was beatable and finishable again is more appealing to me, and all these other things that would just make it feel more like I paid for a product. Yeah. Yes, it doesn't mean I'm going to get an infinite slew of characters until I die, which is obviously the kind of model that these games go for to keep them endlessly regenerating, endlessly popular. But it would make me personally feel a lot more fulfilled. So yeah,
it's a shame.
Game lost.
I'd love to play this game with Nora. Like we really enjoy playing Mario Kart together. Yeah. I don't know if Disney SPEEDSTORM's got the same sort of thing that Mario Kart does, which is having like auto accelerate and auto steering.
It's got both.
That. Well, there we go. But if I can't turn off all of that, might give it a go. I might give it a go. There's no way I think I'm like, touch wood, I think I'm beyond like the pitfalls of those sorts of things.
That's good.
I trust myself to give it a go and look at it and go yes or no. And And but yeah, it will be a case of like Nora goes, oh look, can I play as Elsa? I'd be like, yes, but I will have to play the game 24/7 for the next 2 weeks to unlock her, or
this is it.
Take it out of your pocket money.
Yeah, and it'll be the pocket money until you're 27 as well, because of the ludicrous cost of these things.
Yeah,
like the numbers I gave.
Give her pocket money.
But like the numbers I gave to unlock those characters, they weren't joke numbers.
No, I know.
That's genuinely
well from things. It's awful,
and it's
absolutely
I know
awful.
as well from being at school. Like when kids are excited about a new like Fortnite character or skin or whatever we call them, I always say like, oh, do you unlock that? Is that something you can unlock? And most of the kids are like, yeah, I mean, there's the battle pass. So if you're paying for that, you get it at the end. So that's like 50 hours of play minimum. Or Peter Griffin costs $79.99 or something like that. And just the names and numbers to make me feel like I've been like kicked in the head.
Yeah.
Like it's beyond my understanding.
It's mad. It's mad that I know full well that you can convince yourself that it's worth having.
Yeah. Yeah. And many people do. And that's, that's how these things exist, and that's how these things make money and continue to exist.
Well, there we go.
But yeah, what have you played? Something less grubby?
Yeah, first of all, I'm going to talk about some mobile games that I played over Christmas.
Not grubby ones.
Not grubby ones.
Good.
No,
Good.
Nice ones. But I was looking for some stuff I could play on my phone whilst also being semi-sociable over Christmas and not just like zoning into my Steam Deck or something. And I was also looking for a new fix following my betwatment of Balatro and Slay the Spire. And I found a game called Lost for Swords, which, when written down, is a play on Lost for Words, but it doesn't work as a pun said out loud unless you pronounce it Lost for Swords. And obviously I subsequently called the weapons swords all throughout my play of the game in my mind, which continued to entertain me. But it's a good roguelike deck builder, but unlike Slay the Spire, you also have a dungeon crawling element to it, whereby your deck of cards will be drawn onto a dungeon layout, sort of in a grid, and then some dungeon cards will be put in, sort of walls and traps and things, and then some enemy cards sort of scattered in as well. Then you need to navigate your way to the exit point whilst beating or avoiding enemies, picking up treasure and gold and stuff. It's all quite instantly readable, where what you have to do, which is good. And then you can, realise a lot of depth in the game. There's lots of different towers to beat, all with unique conditions, sets of enemies, and a big bad boss at the end. And then there's currently 3 different starting characters with very different mechanics, and also a variety of different starting decks to play with each of the different characters. And then obviously as you play, you get, over the course of a run, you could add cards to your deck and upgrade the cards in your deck and get potions and items and relics and blah, 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 blah. You'll adapt to different strategies and approaches that, you may suss out. Even if you beat all the towers in the game, you can then basically do New Game Plus for each of the towers up to +9, just to keep on adding increasingly difficult additional challenges to your runs. You can also reduce the challenge as well. If you want to try out like a strategy or a character, but without the pressure, you can sort of reduce it down to -1. There's loads in there. There's loads in there to enjoy, like whatever it is you're in the mood for. It's good. It's nice. I'd recommend it. Lost for Swords.
So silly.
I know. Then I stumbled upon a game called LETTERLIKE. So it's a fairly new game, which is Balatro crossed with Scrabble. It's Scrabbleatro. Scrabbleatro. That makes that would make more sense.
That works.
Yeah, it works literally identically to Balatro in terms of its mechanics of like playing a hand, scoring points, adding multipliers of various different kinds and conditions to get through a set amount of rounds, beat the boss, make it harder, rinse and repeat. But instead of playing poker hands, you're playing words out of Scrabble tiles. And instead of upgrading your different hands like you would in Balatro, like upgrading 2-pair, flush, straight, whatever, you instead upgrade the different word lengths. So you can level up 3-letter words or 4-letter words or 5-letter words. And then you've got multipliers that will be like, this will gain times 0.5 multiplier every 5-letter word you play, and all of that stuff. It is exactly the same as Balatro.
Yeah.
It's a really, really good concept, and it works perfectly for what it's doing. It doesn't have like the character that Balatro has, and it's not all entirely easily like as readable, just because it's all got this very sort of sleek minimalist aesthetic, which, like I said, it makes it feel a little bit cold, but it is cool, and it looks good. But I actually contacted the developer about a few things just to help it be a bit more navigable, specifically with its color coding of certain things, and make that more readable for colorblindies like me.
Colorblind
men and women. It's rare.
Colorblind women.
Colorblind women. He responded really well to that suggestion, which was really nice. So hopefully that'll get added in a patch at some point. If you like Scrabble or anagrams or word puzzles, then you are going to have a fantastic time with this. Didn't quite scratch the Balatro itch enough for me, and I think part of that is owing to the infinitely more options you have when trying to make words out of letters, as opposed to making poker hands out of cards.
Yeah.
With Balatro, you don't always have that many options of hands to play, and also, like, you very specifically know what sort of hand you're trying to play. It's like, it's either a flush or it's not. Whereas in it's not like, oh, has the word dog come up again? No. Okay, well, I need to find another 3-letter word. That's a bad example. Yeah, it's not like, no, I literally don't have another example.
Dog.
Yeah. But obviously, like, the incredible variety in Balatro comes from the combinations of jokers and augmentations of cards, and but when you've got a row of letter tiles to choose from, it's often just a bit overwhelming trying to decide what words to play. And I found myself often staring at my rack of letters for ages, trying to see if I could spot slightly longer words to play, because I think the scoring in the game does work a bit biased towards playing longer words. So even if, like, I've got powered up, I've leveled up like my 5-letter words, and I've got something that's like multiplying just 5-letter words, and they're scoring loads for me. If I play an 8-letter word that wasn't even leveled up, it's probably still going to score me a lot more points.
Yeah.
So I get sort of choice paralysis a lot, and then that made me a bit stressed, in the same way that, like, playing Scrabble does, or Words with Friends. I just sort of had to fight the temptation to look up the best words to play on an online anagram solver or something like that, because that will make me win. It's not like like I said, in Balatro, where it's like, I can very easily see if I've got a royal flush, but I know that that's not going to be the best hand to play. It's not, it doesn't have that sort of nuance. But I think that is very much a me problem. This game is, like I said, it is excellent. It's very, very well made. It's very clever. It's a great analog for Balatro. For word lovers, I'd highly recommend it. LETTERLIKE.
Before you do the next one, I want to send you a link. Where's the most convenient way to do this?
WhatsApp.
It is, but because I don't have WhatsApp on my computer. Anyway, someone's made Balatro for the play date, is what I was going to say.
Brilliant. Oh, there we go. Fantastic.
I'll send it to you later, but anyway, it's out there. It's called Not Quite Balatro, and you can get it on itch for no money.
Brilliant. I'll do that. Neither of these games, however, were scratching the Slay the Spire itch that I was left with, though. So my search continued for that. And first I found a game called Monster Train, which is a roguelike deck builder. It's basically Slay the Spire, but the playing field is set across 3 simultaneous floors of a train. So you're basically playing like 3 games of Slay the Spire at the same time. And
easy.
Then you need to defend the heart of your train that is above the 3rd floor, and defend it against waves of enemies that will appear coming up from the bottom floor, and then up floor, up floor, up floor, until it gets to the heart. So there's a sort of tower defense vibe to it too. It's really well made. It's got great design. It's got loads of depth, loads of content. It was just too much for me to play casually. Too much strategic thinking involved for my poor little old brain. I might return to it one day. It's on Apple Arcade, so easy enough to try if you have that. It is very, very good. Instead, I found a game called WILDFROST, which sits beautifully between Slay the Spire and Monster Train, in that you are commanding 2 rows of card battling waves of incoming enemies. So it's
literally in between.
Yeah. But it's a lot more readable than Monster Train, and a nice additional twist on Slay the Spire. And instead of having like one hero and you playing attack and defense cards, you basically play and send out heroes from your deck onto the battlefield to fend off the waves of enemies and bosses. And the heroes have different characteristics and mechanics and all kinds of stuff to take into account. Yeah, it's really, really good. It's really good, and I'm still playing it quite a lot now. It's presented really, really well. It's got very clear, readable mechanics. There's plenty of depth in there. There's loads of characters. It's really charming. It's very well illustrated and animated. There's loads to unlock as well, and it's really easy to see what you need to do next to unlock the next thing. And there's daily challenge runs as well. So it's just great. Every time I turn it on, I can do a run, and with some sort of intention in mind, but I'm probably going to have a great time regardless.
Yeah.
I really recommend that one. WILDFROST. One word.
WILDFROST.
WILDFROST. Lost for Swords, Letterlike, Monster Train, and WILDFROST. I happily recommend any of these mobile games, to be honest. They're all pretty sure they're all like free to download and try, and then you can buy the full game if you want. And each of them is probably only a few quid anyway. Give them a whirl if you fancy broadening your roguelike mobile horizons.
Do it.
You played anything else, Chrissy boy?
Yes, I have played a game called GUNFIELD, and GUNFIELD is a survivor's light because I had that itch that I get. It's also a reasonably traditional bullet hell shoot 'em up, so it's kind of a mixed bag of the two genres. I've played about 10 hours of it now. I'm now looking to close out some of its more difficult to more specific challenges, but I think I can say with some confidence that it is a really decent game. I think it works really, really well. The mix of genres works surprisingly fluidly because you take on kind of traditional shmup stages with like a Star Fox style branching path as you get further into it. You build and then level up your ship using experience that's dropped by popcorn enemies, and then you balance shooting and dodging as you would in any traditional shooter, whilst also building a sort of automated death machine from the pool of weapons and passive upgrades as you would in any Survivors-like game. A few episodes ago, I played a game called Cozy Space Survivors.
I remember.
That also melded kind of Survivors gameplay with shooter elements, but it did so firstly with a twin stick control scheme rather than fixed scrolling stages, so it was less traditional in that sense. And it also lent a lot more into being kind of a very soft mission-based RPG rather than a traditional shmup where it's kind of like you do a run to the end, you either win or you lose kind of thing. I liked it a lot for what it was, but I like GUNFIELD quite a lot more because it demands much more attention through needing you to actually draw upon skills that you associate first and foremost with the parent genre. It is still a shoot 'em up. It just happens to have an upgrade system from Survivors games. If you don't pay attention to your movement, you're not going to survive. And especially when it comes to the last achievements that I'm going for at the moment, which are all damageless boss battles with kind of major endgame meanies, you're just not going to make any progress unless you understand how to read the bullet patterns and learn how to get around them and stuff like that. No matter your kind of warhorse of a build, you still need to know the fundamentals. I'm still genuinely and hugely impressed that the Survivors-like subgenre has had the legs that it has. But I think it's because it fundamentally tickles such a base part of our rat brains because it's got that kind of little and often rewards sort of trigger dopamine delivery system. And what I'm perhaps more impressed by, though, in playing something like GUNFIELD or still playing like Temtem Survivors with Georgia and stuff like that, is that I don't think I've found any other game that beats Vampire Survivors at its own game. It's still the best game to do this. And that's quite impressive, like a few years on now. Every game I've played seems to excel in one area, and you go, wow, that's great, but it misses somewhere else.
Yeah.
So Temtem Swarm, like I just said, Georgia and I are picking through. We're playing kind of a few runs here and there. She's got really into it and is now playing it when I'm not even in the house. She's really, really picked it up. It's got great character, but it feels a bit listless in kind of the back-end admin, whereas Vampire Survivors was like, I have a great time playing it. I love the metagame. I love all the stuff in between. Like, there weren't any weak links for me. GUNFIELD successfully transplants much of kind of the Vampire's formula into this new genre, but perhaps doesn't have the longevity that I'd like because of the inherent limitations of shooters, because they are pattern-based. They need to be learnable. So you will get bored eventually because it can't be as big as like the original Vampire Survivors. over the last couple of years, I've mentioned a lot of these on the show in passing. I've played and enjoyed, this is a non-exhaustive list, Beautiful Mystic Survivors, Goobies, Wedding Witch, Twilight Survivors, Brotato, Malignant Survivors, probably loads of others, but none of them seem to hit the home run of their inspiration. And so Vampire Survivors remains, if we're being totally honest, basically the be-all and end-all of this subgenre of action roguelikes, because no one else seems to be able to connect authentically to that framework, that's subscribing to the little and often reward system, remaining really accessible because that game is understandable within 5 seconds of playing, still having kind of the build depth to reward meta thought, and whilst also keeping its own unique direction with like a distinct audiovisual aesthetic, because as much as it looks kind of ropey in places, Vampire Survivors owns that aesthetic, and it has consistently right up until now that it's, had many, many updates. It's linked with many, popular franchises, everything else. They're still doing it their way, which is quite exciting that they've really just owned it. I keep trying basically every copycat that releases because I really do enjoy the loop that these games provide. But even when I get really stuck in, like I've done with Gunfield, it's impossible not to think in the back of my head, could just start a new game with Vampire Survivors, which is where I'm at the moment. As I get towards the end of Gunfield, I'm like, I never finished all the DLC stuff. There's so much to do. I could just wipe my Steam save and start again. So that's on the cards maybe for February.
You haven't played Halls of Torment, have you?
No.
That's
I know
really
you really
good.
recommended that one.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll bump that up the list as well. It may well be in my Steam library.
It
all
almost
these things.
certainly is.
I buy them because you recommend them or someone else recommends them, and then they go on sale and I go, £2. I'm actually losing money not to have this, which is not true.
That's true.
I understand how economics works.
That is true.
But in my mind,
and also, if you buy it for £2, you've technically saved £15. So you may as well spend that £15 as well.
That is exactly how my brain works. It's exactly how my brain works. That in my mind, I'm like, I would like this thing. It's £40. It's only 20. Well, I've just gained 20 every single time.
£20.
It's like I feel so rich. I feel so rich. And yeah, that has been the same since I was a child, right through to now, approaching 40 years old. Oh, dear me. I mean, you've just mentioned a load of kind of Balatro adjacent type card games, things like that. With Balatro's success, especially in the end of year lists of 2024, I'm fully expecting that to be the next game, like Vampire Survivors, that now has 2-3 years of copycats, clones, genre mashups, and they will flood Steam and they will flood mobile and everything else pretty hard, I'd say, over the next year or two. But what's the betting that none of them actually scratched quite the same itch as Balatro?
Of course they won't.
Because both those games have been proper like lightning in a bottle stuff, I think, for very small teams of one person in Balatro, I think 3 people at Ponkle for Vampire Survivors, to make these kind of just unbelievably...
One for each of the frames of animation.
Yeah. But they both teams have created like these unbelievably disruptive indie projects that have had far more kind of influence and will ripple through the industry in a way that most other big AAA stuff just will not at the moment. It just will not cut through in that way. So yeah, Vampire Survivors great. Gunfield, I'm enjoying a lot. Not quite as great. Balatro, even though I'm rubbish at it, even though I played a tiny portion of what you played, also great. And yeah, it's just interesting to see how these things actually spiral out and kind of create this just forever waterfall of similar experiences that just don't quite drip in the right way. Yeah.
Mario and Luigi Brothership. The almighty return of the Mario RPG sub-series after a bit of a hiatus. And this is indeed the first Mario and Luigi game that is playable in HD, because the previous entries have all been tied to the Nintendo handheld families. Playing a Mario and Luigi game in HD is actually an important thing here, because it meant I was actually able to play one for the first time, because a key component of these games is actioning red and green command cues to play out the mechanics of Mario or Luigi.
Yeah.
And being colorblind, I couldn't ever differentiate them quick enough in like the lower resolution and the smaller size. But in HD, with a bit more crispness and being able to see like more clearly the differences between the bros, meant that I could play it. I mean, not entirely without issue. There's a few of the more like complex battle combos that you get certainly later in the game that I just couldn't navigate because the commands were too obscured and too quick. But I got to the end of the game. I think I beat all the side quests as well.
Show off.
The one thing I will say about Mario and Luigi Brothership is that it is mad that you can play a game for about 60 hours and it also be entirely and utterly forgettable.
That's it.
No. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this game. The adventure is fun, the world is huge, the fighting mechanics are good, the writing is suitably whimsical and witty, it looks nice, it sounds nice, but it's just not left any sort of lasting impression at all. To the point that I found it hard to put something together to cover it on here because that's about all I can say. But yeah. I really, really just got my finger in my brain and waggled it about a bit and pulled out just one positive and one negative piece of criticism of the game.
It's two lines exactly.
Two lines. Something I really liked in Mario and Luigi Brothership is the particular design of the characters and islands that you explore in this new world. To describe them without seeing them, you would say they are plug-socket-based entities.
Okay.
And the whole game sort of leans into that general idea of plugs and sockets.
What a strange aesthetic. That was not where I thought you were going there.
I say, much in the way that, like, Paper Mario, that those games like lean into the paper and crafting side of life. The fact that, like, the world you explore is actually made up of several different separate islands made it all very navigable and easy to keep track of, like, you know, where you were and where you were going next as you seek to plug all of these drifting islands back into the central Brothership. The biggest criticism I can lay at the feet of Mario and Luigi Brothership is that it does outstay its welcome somewhat. There is a lot of content in here, but I feel that it's about, I don't know, 20-25% too long. Some bits aren't great, some bits are brilliant. The whole game could have done with just like a big editorial trim, I think. I got to the point where I thought I was about to take on the final boss, but instead I just opened up a whole other area and side of the game to play, which would usually be like a nice surprise in a game, but here it just sort of felt more like a hassle.
Could not be bothered.
Yeah. it made me think of a good comparison point. Mario and Luigi Brothership is very much like your second serious relationship. It's nice, comfortable, enjoyable, fun. It's not perfect, but then again, it sustains you for a good while, but eventually the things that niggled you at the start really grate near the end. If you'd wrap things up a bit quicker, there's a chance you could have ended things without becoming bitter, but instead you insisted on giving it just one more summer and got fed up to the back teeth with it and traded it in for something more Italian, in my case. But I think at the beginning of 2024, if you'd have said we'd have had a Paper Mario remake, a Mario RPG remake, and a new Mario and Luigi game coming in the next 12 months, we wouldn't have believed you. So it is great to see some love being shown for this strand of Mario's adventures, because there's a lot of great potential there to explore. I still can't quite work out the reason why the Mario and Luigi games and the Paper Mario games just like emerged as two totally separate series, because they are exactly the same.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We'll see if Nintendo maintain their interest in these series on Switch 2. Hopefully, maybe they'll put something together that's just a bit longer lasting in the memory than Brothership. But it's fine.
Absolutely fine.
Absolutely fine.
I wasn't sure what I wanted to talk about this month for my final game. I've played a little more Persona 3 Reload.
Oh.
It's good. It's stylish. The battle system is really tight. Having a nice time, but I've still only played maybe 5 hours of a 100+ hour RPG.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'm not the person to talk about that, at least at the moment. I just received Donkey Kong Country Returns HD for the Switch as well a few days ago. I had a stolen evening playing through the first couple of worlds, and I had a really nice time. But I couldn't really think of an interesting angle to come at when the game is, in essence, just the Wii version of the game, without motion controls, and scaled up nicely to HD. You know, if you liked the original, if you liked it on the 3DS but wanted it big, you'll like this. That's all there is, really. If you've never played it but have enjoyed any of the Donkey Kong Country games previously, you'll probably like this. If you've never played a Donkey Kong game at all, but have always felt like 2D Mario games are let down by being slightly too shiny, slightly too precise, and you want something a bit woollier, here we go. Returns is, you're going to have a decent time. It's hardly the swan song the Switch deserves, given its proximity to the Switch 2's official announcement. I think it came out on the same day. But it's a good time if you're after a traditional platformer. I'm going to keep playing it. I'll have a nice time. Probably mention it again in the future. So with Persona and DK off the table, what did I decide to talk about? Top marks to anyone who said Chris will go back and play about 20 plus hours of the original Earth Defense Force.
Yep.
By way of a...
That's on my bingo card.
Yeah, by way of a little taste of 2018's EDF 5. I did play that as well. But then that just made me want to go back and try really hard to finish my save in Monster Attack, which was the very first entry on the PS2.
Oh, yeah.
The newer entry first. EDF 5 represents the start of the most recent Earth Defense reboot timeline. I hadn't realised it was this complicated, but I looked into it for this. Last year's EDF 6 is a direct continuation of the story of 5. They've never bothered with that before. It's the first one that has an ongoing story between two games. The story is still aliens invade, humans attempt to hold back the assault using a cache of heavy weaponry. That's it. But doing a little digging, I'd never realised that, one, those two games were connected, and two, that the series to date has had such a weird and fascinating narrative chronology. So just as a quick update, Monster Attack and then Global Defense Force on the PlayStation 2 are essentially Earth Defense Force 1 and 2, and they represent one complete timeline. Earth Defense Force 2017 and then Earth Defense Force 4, which is also sometimes known as 2025, are remakes of the original two games and represent their own timeline. 5 and 6 are yet another set of remakes that again rebuild their own timeline. So the game has 6 entries, 3 sets of 2 games, all just the same story, redone on slightly sharper systems, basically. To make it slightly more complicated as well, the World Brothers kind of like blocky Minecraft style spin-offs, they tie all of the previous games' parallel universes together in a weird way that is both canon and not canon and whatever else. But all of these games are really fun. I've consistently enjoyed this series. I like it a lot. Playing the first few stages of 5, my main takeaway was this game runs too well and is too polished, which seems a really stupid thing to say because in just about every other game in the world, smooth performance would be a net positive. But EDF is such a curious beast, and in the entries I've played on the PS2, the 360, the Vita, even the PS4, every game I've played, the scale of the world, the scale of the encounters, it's always felt exaggerated in a good way and made to feel beefier and weightier by there just being too many things on screen at all times. You know, if my console isn't wheezing and choking as it's trying to render 1,000 and invaders at the same time as like an errant rocket launcher flies into the distance and smoke trails are clearing the whole screen and there's crumbling skyscrapers that take a nick from your salvo, then it doesn't feel like Earth Defense Force. And I always say it's a very acquired taste. Some people are going to absolutely hate it because for most people, most sane people, a better running game will equal a game that's more fun to play. But for me, so much of what appeals to me in this series has come from the sense of spectacle that it generates in this weird way. The schlocky writing and the voice work is neither here nor there. I've never really cared. I just want every skirmish to reach a point where I physically cannot see what's happening on screen. When that happens, I go, yes, yes, it's a good game. I'm having fun. And that's the real EDF experience for me. It has to fall down to like an absolute kind of single digit frame rate slideshow. And then I'm living my best life. So back to the PS2 I went, or back to PS2 emulation at least. I picked up my save, which is now 25 hours deep, I think, after the time I played recently. I've really endeavoured to beat the outstanding stages to try and do this game properly. If you remember right back to when I talked about this probably a year plus ago, there's 25 stages total. Each one needs to be beaten across 5 difficulties, so 125 levels in total. And when I picked up my save this time, I'd beaten, I think, 95, thereabouts. After a few evenings' work, I'm now up to, I think, 115, so I've got 10 left. And that's just 3 more on the game's second to highest difficulty, called Chaos, and 7 more on the game's final tier, called Inferno. On Inferno, the game is almost unplayable in every stage. Like what's interesting though is that on the easiest difficulties, it still runs badly, but you don't even need to really aim. Things are going to get killed just by you walking and holding on the fire button. By the end, you need proper strategy. You need to be thinking, where do I need to be on the map to make it so I can get a shot in? How far do I need to be back so I'm not going to be killed by my own weaponry and stuff like that? There's a lot to consider within this mess. And that's quite fun in a strange way. I'm at the stage now where I essentially need to grind for health to make my character better, to even have a chance of beating these last few stages. And it's been really interesting to step back and think of this game and its relation to like the RPG genre in that way. Because in every stage, I'm like collecting weapon pickups and health pickups. Sometimes weapon pickups will grant me new weapons. That means that for a future stage, I might say, oh, this new weapon is going to help me because it gives me more range or more damage or something, or the reload times are better. So it's like you're speccing a character in an RPG. And then the health pickups end up being ongoing kind of, they improve your character indefinitely. It's like a passive thing that increases through the game. So every one you pick up, it adds to your total tally and your life gets higher and higher and higher, making it easier to take down bigger things as well, as if you've leveled up. You know, it's like your stamina cap on a character in an RPG getting better, replicating the way that works. And it means that sort of grinding part, I've essentially been treating the same way that I know people do with RPGs, like podcast on in the background, maybe having a video on a second screen, something to just kind of entertain me whilst I just farm health on an easier stage.
Yeah.
I've hit a real wall where I don't know how long this grind will be to make the last few levels doable. But in the same way, I quite enjoyed doing that when I was, trying to take down the Elite Four back on Pokemon Red when I was 12. It's weirdly reminiscent of that, where it's like, get there in the end. It's worth doing because, if you're going to do it, you're going to do it properly. I don't know how long it's going to take me to finish the game fully, but I do really want to finish it. And longer term listeners may remember me trying to beat this exact game. First on my backwards compatible PS3 that died, and it took all my progress with it.
Oh, yeah.
Then on a fresh save on my original Steam Deck. Then because I was an idiot who forgot the importance of backing anything up when I moved to the OLED, didn't take my save because I wiped the console. So that went, I had to start again. So this is my third attempt to beat a game that I've essentially been trying since, I don't know, 2021, 22, probably on and off. And I really want it to be a successful third time lucky because I'm so close to the end. But it could take the same time I've put in again to beat this last 10 stages. So who knows? But yeah, great series. And maybe one day I'll actually play one of the new ones and enjoy 60 frames a second for a laugh.
Nah.
Wouldn't have thought so.
Overrated.
Wouldn't be me.
Play it on the play date.
I'd love it.
Because I think like one of the reasons why I play so many roguelike games or find the draw to play them so strong is that like they just suit my life, my schedule really, really well. I can pick them up. I can play a little or a lot, get balls deep, and then we'll just like skim the surface. It's possibly why like I didn't have a massively long lasting impression of Mario and Luigi because I was maybe just in a rush to get it over with. That's it's not the case because I put 100 hours into Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and it's one of the greatest games I've ever played.
Wowzers. I don't know where you find the time.
I don't know
where you find the time.
I'm self-employed and my boss is very lenient. Like when I was younger and had more free time, so like substantial blocks of time, this is exactly the sort of stuff I'd want to be playing. But it's it's actually taken me 3 years, I think, to finally get around to playing Xenoblade Chronicles 3 because of just how imposing the sheer size of the game is, and also knowing that it wouldn't be a game that I could slowly chip away at whilst watching Love Island on the sofa of an evening. This was a game I wanted to be fully immersed in, sound cranked up, playing it on the TV if I could, because it's all just so dense and delicious. And I was also fearful that Xenoblade 3 wouldn't live up to Xenoblade 1 and 2, although I had the same reluctance in starting Xenoblade 2 because of my insistence that it couldn't possibly be better than 1. I thought, these are all new characters. If I haven't got Shulk, it can't be as good. But
if it's not Rhine time.
It's not Rhine time. It's not my time. But lo and behold, they raised their game phenomenally. So, in fact, I distinctly remember the first there's a cutscene like fairly early on in the game, and there's a piece of music on the soundtrack called Counterattack, and that kicked in, and I knew this was just going to be absolutely incredible. Like honestly, if you haven't heard the track Counterattack from the Xenoblade Chronicles 2 soundtrack, stop what you're doing right now. Go and listen to it, because I guarantee you, your life will be better on the other side of it. It is that good.
So I hang up now, and then we'll do this in a minute.
I would love for you to sit there and listen to it now.
In real time.
Honestly.
Like,
do you want to do it?
No.
Okay.
No.
But listen to it. I'll send you a link to it later.
Okay.
It has no right. It has no right. But something that's brilliant about these games to help that sense of, not wanting to move on from a set of characters or a story, or worrying that the third part of the trilogy might disappoint, is that like every Xenoblade Chronicles game is pretty much its own standalone story, not even touching the stories of the other games. They're all taking place in this same world, yeah, but all three games come from very different perspectives, and the overarching story, whilst incredible and brilliant and mind-blowing, is almost there as a bonus, because the core stories in these games, like the human stories and relationships, that's what make these games compelling. And it's brilliant that they've decided not to risk, damaging the legacy of the other games by continuing the story of characters whose story had come to a natural conclusion.
Yeah.
I honestly think you could play any of the three Xenoblade Chronicles games in isolation from the others without any problem. Obviously, there are overlaps and overarching lore here, but these are very different sets of characters set in very different eras of this world, and all three games have very different tones as well, which has just been like amazing to see sort of unfold and evolve across the series. Like Xenoblade Chronicles 1 was very much like a cool sci-fi action movie set in a world that was actually the remains of two extraordinary titans frozen in time mid-battle. We think, how on earth could that possibly be expanded on? And then Xenoblade Chronicles 2 raised the stakes, broadened the vision to be set on a range of titans that were alive and moving around, and then you get to put a cute baby titan on your back and carry him around. And this whole game is then just this much more of a sweeping, swashbuckling space opera. And by that sort of thinking, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 feels like a dystopian war epic. It is. Yeah, the world in Xenoblade 3 feels sparse and barren and war-torn. There are no glorious cities and charming communities. Instead, all the settlements in the game are colonies from two warring factions of Kebes and Agnus. And these colonies are all centered around a giant hulking Pharaonis, it's called, a machine that acts as like a central hub for the colony when it's stationed, and then everything can pack up into it and it can just tear its way across the landscape to another location should it need to. And like, I was initially a bit concerned by this setup because of just how bleak it all felt, but the game then uses this backdrop to paint a really compelling, deeply moving narrative with this fantastic premise built into this world at war. Like, all of these soldiers that are fighting in these colonies, they're all these artificially created soldiers, and they're created to be born at, like, I couldn't quite work out what it was, but it feels like they're born at about 12 years old, and then they have a 10-year lifespan of just repetitive like training and then fighting under the threat of each colony's flame clock that needs to be filled by continually harvesting lives, or else it will run out and the soldiers will die. It's just so horribly bleak. Obviously, the story takes shows you the story of what happens when somebody comes along and tries to break all of this down and free all these people. But the whole thing is just, it is bleak, but it's a great commentary on the futility of war and conflict, and how so many people feel they are born into a certain way of life and don't question it. And if there's, if there is even another choice to take, questioning those in authority and what their motives are, whether we have value or we're just serving as pawns in a system. It's a lot to think about. And as it did with the first two games, it uses then the science fiction genre trapping so brilliantly to create these existential dilemmas that you can't explore if you don't have 100 hours of batshit foundation to launch the philosophy from. I'm not going to spoil any of the ins and outs of the story. I'm not even going to talk about the characters, because going along for the ride, learning all of these characters' stories and backstories and twists and turns is what makes so many RPGs just incredibly enjoyable, especially when it's brought to life so amazingly by this voice cast, delivering every ridiculous line of dialogue with such tenacity, honesty, and earnestness. You cannot help but believe in them. And this sort of like the over-the-top writing and dialogue that was definitely present in one has been reined in since the first game, which is probably for the best, but it's still got a great big dollop of melodrama to it. And I love all of that over the top dialogue. I mean, I love anything in life that just sort of just enjoys itself 100% unashamedly. Just love the things you love, man. And it doesn't matter that like you hear some of the same expressions in the game a billion times, because they trigger every time you win a battle or find a valuable item. Like my favorite is the delightfully vague, "Oh, I found a rare doodah," which reminds me of like a piece of commentary in FIFA 2004 or something like that just said, "Oh, certain defenders are pushing certain forwards." But if I was the voice actor for that line in Xenoblade, I would say it in real life as often as humanly possible, just to see if it got a reaction. Just ordering a piece of cake. Can I have a slice of that vanilla doodah, please? Also, like, the names in the game are great fun. Like, not so much the character names, they're fine, but like item names and the names of special enemies that will be lurking around the map, which sort of serve as optional mini bosses. To name these mini bosses, there's about 150 of them, like, across the whole world. It's like someone just did a lucky dip on an adjective and then picked a name at random from like the A to Z of baby names. It's not quite as ridiculous as they used to be. Like, I don't know, like Lethargic Gerald or Suspicious Kevin, or
I forgot all these names from Xenoblade 1.
Obsequious Bill. But they're a bit more epic now. Like, you do get occasionally like Titanic Walloper or something like that, but like you still have like Rowdy Carlos or Sycophantic Lilith, and it's ridiculous and always fun. But they always have fun with like just the names of items as well. Like, you're picking up hundreds of things that you don't really need to know what they do or what they are, but it'll pop up and it'll just be like, that's a ridiculous thing, like a whisper sausage or something. And in my life, I always like to play a game with Sammy, my wife, where I'll say, if you had to change your name to A or B, what would it be? And then give her two utterly horrible choices.
Yeah.
But now I've just been doing it, just picking names of items from Xenoblade 3. Like, if you had to change your name to Misty Asparagus or Empress Lettuce, what would it be? Or if you had to be Rick Fossil, what would you do? Yeah.
With Georgia, I don't give her options. I just say, would you like it if your name was? And then I'll say like Colin Stilson, and it will be related to nothing. And then she'll just turn to me and say, I don't know. Like, not really. It's like, all right then, fair enough. Move on.
But the choices I give Sammy is either basically it comes down to, would you rather destroy your personal life or your professional life?
Yeah,
because you have to make that choice now.
Both funny in different ways.
yeah, not for you, and in reality, it would definitely not be for me either.
Yeah.
But let's imagine that it was
massive walloper,
Titanic wallop. I can't talk about the Xenoblade games without also mentioning the quality of the music. It is absolute top-tier, god-class RPG music. The sheer amount of it in the games is staggering when you see like how many themes there are, how many variations the themes have as well, and just how staggeringly well and densely orchestrated they are. So many bangers, so many deeply beautiful and emotional moments. And honestly, when Nintendo get round to adding the soundtracks of these games on the Nintendo Music app, I might just not listen to anything else for a solid year, and I don't think I'd get bored. Playing the Xenoblade games can be a bit overwhelming because of how dense the systems are in the game. There are a lot of systems, and they continue to be iterated upon and stacked on top of other systems and mechanics as you get further and further into the game. There's so many classes to choose from, so many heroes to unlock, and different ways of fusing different classes together to create the perfect team build. And like, I honestly didn't come close to understanding most of it, but it never impacted my enjoyment of the game, because like the broad strokes of the game, certainly the combat, pretty readable. And then you'll pick some of this stuff up along the way to like add in how you tackle the battles, and like by the end, like I was pulling off, combos and chain attacks and super arts and all kinds of things that would like rely on like queuing up like a correct sequence of about 30 different things.
Yeah.
And like, if you showed that to me when I started the game, I'd be like, well, that's wizardry. But now I'm just like, yeah, but I haven't even scratched the surface. But like, the game gives you the chance to customize how much you enter into all of this. So like, when you're sort of like building your characters and equipping them with various things and skills and equipment, you can just auto build, and the game will just recommend a set of powers and equipment. You can turn the difficulty up and down at any point. You can turn on auto battling for like most of the battles in the game. You still have to take manual control for like boss battles and like the unique enemy battles, but because like you're always got a party of like 6 or 7 people, you're only ever controlling one at a time. If you just stood there and did nothing with the game sat on easy, you'd probably be all right. But like if you want to get balls deep in the systems and really give yourself a challenge, then you can change the difficulty up. But manually go through all the menus and the menus to have everything optimized within an inch of its life and feel like a total champ. Like I found myself sometimes whacking on auto battling when I was doing side quests or tracking through an area with lots of unavoidable fights with lower leveled enemies if I wasn't quite feeling the need to manually fight a bunch of rabbits or something. But it's nice that it puts that in your hands. Like if you've looked at a Xenoblade game and thought, I cannot possibly understand what's going on there, you're right. But good news, you don't need to have a really, really great time. Like I think I wrapped the main story in just over 90 hours, rolled the credits. I dove straight back in to mop up a few things that I'd left undone. I don't think I'll ever come close to properly 100%ing it, but like I did a lot of the side quests. I built up my affinities very high with a lot of characters and a lot of colonies. I fought like a lot of the unique monsters, including the
Walloping Bill.
I defeated the set of like, I think there's like 5 super bosses and then a final super one. I did them. I didn't like feel the compulsion that I used to feel to do absolutely everything. I mean, I was gutted when I came to the end of the story because I wanted more, but I was also happy to call time on it when it felt like I'd done enough in the game for me to go, yeah, I've absolutely played that game,
Yeah.
But also part of the reason was that I've got the standalone DLC for Xenoblade 3 called Future Redeemed, which is its own 30+ hour RPG.
It's mad.
And properly pulls all the strands from Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3 together for like the first time to properly like. Apparently, it's just like the most amazing like climax and finale for the trilogy, and I cannot wait. I cannot wait to keep playing it. Honestly, I think like. I mean, well, I haven't played Xenoblade Chronicles X, which I know apparently it's entirely unconnected to the main trilogy. Whether or not we'll have some like additional content coming in the definitive edition to weave it in a little bit, I don't know. They might be laying the groundwork for Xenoblade Chronicles 4 or Xenoblade Chronicles X 2. They did that with Final Fantasy, didn't they?
That's not 22, it'll be 12, so it's a bad joke. They did, yeah. X2 was a Final Fantasy one.
But I can safely say, hand on heart, that this should be considered among the very best RPG series, right alongside Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Fire Emblem, any of these. Xenoblade Chronicles are your equal. I declare it.
And therefore it is so.
At that point, around the world in 80 games. Austria, beautiful country. Beautiful country. I loved it when I went there. Absolutely beautiful. Yeah. I want to know about the games of Austria, Chris. I've played one. Have you?
Yeah, of course.
Before we do that, do you want to know some facts about Austria?
Yeah, of course.
Austria has the world's oldest zoo, which is over 270 years old.
That is old.
And the world's oldest still operating restaurant, which is in Salzburg. That was founded in 803 AD, apparently.
Bloody
so
hell.
It's 1,200 years old. They still haven't replaced the candles. The first postcards came from Austria, and the first woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize was Baroness Bertha von Suttner, an Austro-Hungarian. That's boring. It's about a woman, isn't it? Those two facts are really dull. Cut them out, and then for some reason they're back in.
Bloody Apple AI.
Bloody right, yeah. Most famously, as we found out actually in our first stop of our Around the World in 80 Games tour, Danish pastries are from Austria.
Yes, I forgot that.
Yeah. And of course, it can only be known as a Viennese whirl if it is a delightful buttery biscuit sandwich filled with jam and cream, if it is from the Austrian city of Vienna. Otherwise, it should technically be known as a jarkling spammy dodger.
Oh, I don't like Jammy Dodgers. I think they're incredibly overrated as biscuits go.
They're one of the few mainstream biscuits I can have. They don't have milk in,
No milk, no milk solids.
Yeah,
well,
so I like them.
Well,
there we go. What are the games? The Austrian games, Chris?
Oh, interesting mix this month. Prior to the year 2000, it's actually quite hard to pick out any kind of mega hits from Austria. Some of the Anno games, the strategy games we mentioned when talking about Germany, were developed in Austria. You've got a swathe of Amiga and DOS games from that era that I'm sure someone is very, very passionate about, but that someone, unfortunately, on this occasion, is not me. Post-millennium, we start to see more recognisable properties appear, especially in the indie space. There is a game called And Yet It Moves that I remember playing on the Wii. It was an interesting experimental platform game. There was also a game called Cursed Mountain, also on the Wii, a survival horror game from Spring Interactive that I never played, but I have seen it 100,000 times on the shelves of CEX. So I know it definitely sold to someone and then was sold on to essentially a modern pawn shop. Bongfish was a developer who found most fame from some of their Xbox Live titles for the 360, including a modern version of Motocross Madness, Harm's Way, and a snowboarding game, sadly always in the shadow of SSX and Amped, but a game called Stoked that, again, I've seen many times, but I've not played it. But that was probably their biggest profile release in terms of a boxed retail title for the 360 and PS3. Perhaps biggest in Austria, at least in terms of critical acclaim, is Moon Studios, who have been responsible for both Ori titles, Ori and the Blind Forest and Ori and the Will of the Wisps. After a few years' silence, they're back this year with a new title called No Rest for the Wicked. It's unrelated to Ori, but shaping up to potentially be something quite special. I'm sure you've got your eye at least half on it because of your love for the Ori franchise.
Yeah, I love them.
Outside of development, though, the biggest mover and shaker in Austria is Vienna-based publisher THQ Nordic. Now, the timeline of this particular mega publisher has been pretty storied, with it beginning as just Nordic Games in 2011, before gradually absorbing the corpses of other publishers and subsidiaries until it reached the point today, because of burping, where, under the Embracer umbrella, it collectively owns the licenses to quite literally hundreds of titles. In their first year, they ate up the back catalogue of small Austrian publisher called Joe Wood Entertainment, who were responsible for publishing many PC titles throughout the 90s and aughts. Most notable IP is probably things like the Painkiller series, the Gothic series, the Spellforce games. Not massive, but big enough that people know them. This purchase also included the full catalogues of already conglomerated Dreamcatcher Interactive and the Adventure Company, responsible again for a whole swathe of point-and-click titles primarily. A lot of them licensed games based on properties like Agatha Christie and Sherlock Holmes, and they released a lot of shovelware for the DS as well. But that suddenly, day one, was all part of THQ Nordic. Now, it's worth noting that to publish does not mean to develop, and as such, the bigger, wider back catalogues of these fallen publishers are not explicitly Austrian games. But I think it's an interesting perspective to take for a change because of how condensed the industry has become in terms of rights holders. And we are in 2025 we're in now, getting dangerously close to the old Hollywood model where 5 or 6 studios literally control every single property being made.
Yeah.
And THQ Nordic under Embracer are right in the mix as one of the most dominant hands in the business right now. So not content with that original 2011 stable, Nordic would go on to acquire everything ever published by THQ in a bankruptcy buyout in 2013. That meant that overnight, the newly merged and now titled THQ Nordic were suddenly the keepers of Red Faction and Darksiders and all the ATV and MX motocross racing games and about a billion other often licensed properties and titles. Not content with all that, a few months later they would also scoop up the Desperados franchise and the Jonathan Dunn favourite Silver from Atari, just for a laugh.
Yeah.
Since then, the group has continued to add to their collection any time weaker publishers wobble even a little bit, and eventually split and rebranded and whatevered, I don't know what you call it, to birth the Embracer Group fully. Although Embracer are headquartered officially in Sweden, their Austrian roots in Nordic were the snowball that started rolling and growing to produce the ridiculous behemoth they now are. And it's actually quite frightening to realise just how much of the modern games industry sits within their roster. If we eventually get to Sweden with this series, we may need to pull a double episode, as just from a quick skim, teams as diverse as Saber Interactive, who have been responsible for almost all of the Switch's Wonder ports like The Witcher 3, Limited Run Games as a physical publishing house, developers like Deep Silver, who created Dead Island, Milestone, who make a lot of racing games, including the recent Hot Wheels titles, Coffee Stain Games, who are responsible for the Goat Simulator franchise, as well as, this is a real curveball, Middle-earth Enterprises, the keepers of all media properties related to the Lord of the Rings films, games, and representative works, are all under Embracer's purview. So, yeah, it's quite scary. You know, the way that things have kind of merged like that, everything sits under about 4 different roofs. You know, Sony are buying studios left, right, and centre. Microsoft are doing the same with Xbox studios, things like that. There's not that many independent groups anymore. So, yeah, don't know what that means for the future. Not a lot of chance to make it as an indie, maybe. Or just that you get eaten by someone else and then you make it as an indie within a bigger project like old Dave the Diver.
Yeah.
Anyway, what did you, Jonathan Dunn, play this month? And is it a Metroidvania?
It's not.
Oh, that's disappointing.
Is it?
What did you play?
Well, I'll start by saying there haven't been that many games we've played in this series that really feel like they're from the country that they're from. It's only something we've mentioned a few times. It's really nice when they do, with like Raji and H and Epic, obviously being a real standout in that character as a representation of India. But Dungeons of Hinterberg feels so beautifully, wonderfully Austrian that it took me right back to a lovely holiday I had there a few years ago with my buddy Steve. We stayed in an apartment that overlooked the mountains, and we did a lot of relaxing in our apartment, just enjoying the peace and quiet and the views, but also went up some mountains. I did a lot of walking in the woods surrounding our place, and as soon as I started Dungeons of Hinterberg, it honestly felt like I had fresh air in my lungs.
Yeah.
The premise of Dungeons of Hinterberg is quite straightforward. You play as Louisa, who is a law student who comes to the town of Hinterberg in the Austrian Alps for a holiday. Hinterberg's not a real place, but in the game it's garnered a lot of attention for the magical dungeons that have sprung up in the mountains around it. And these are what Louisa has come to explore. And the game is sort of divided into 2 phases. You get the dungeon exploration, and then you've got the social simulation in the town. And every day you wake up and you choose which dungeon you want to tackle and explore, and then in the evening you mooch about the town and chit-chat with the locals and the other visiting adventurers to flesh out the human side of Louisa's story. And both sides of Dungeons of Hinterberg are really well realised. Like, the dungeon crawling aspect is excellent. Each of the different dungeons in the game, I think that apparently there's about 25 of them, I think. Each of them have a totally different mechanic to utilise. So like in the first dungeon you can summon a giant bomb. That's like your one tool. It's like, you know, like the different powers you get in Breath of the Wild or something like that. That's like really sort of allows you to manipulate stuff. It's like, here you go, here's this one, see what you can do. And it means that there's a great lateral thinking twist to the puzzles. And also the combat that you find inside the dungeons. There's some really, really good puzzles in there. It is like reminiscent of like some of the shrines in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Combat is nice and crunchy. It feels good as you develop like physical and magical abilities too. And then the social side of Dungeons of Hinterberg is just so gosh darn cozy that you may as well just be playing a big bowl of hot chocolate.
Yeah.
Like, the characters are all really well written. They've got loads of personality. You really start to lose yourself into, you know, this life, having this lovely routine. You find yourself like investing in the ins and outs of the social side of it, when like mechanically, like in terms of the game, you don't have to. You could just whiz through it to get to the next dungeon. But like, the more I got to know Louisa and the other characters, the more I wanted to spend time developing some of those relationships, and that really would like help propel me through the game, because I'd always be looking forward to the next dungeon, and then when I was nearing the end of the dungeon, I'd start looking forward to who I was going to chat to that evening, and then I'd get excited for the dungeon the following day.
Good loop.
It helps that it all looks lovely as well. The sound work in the game is also excellent, especially when you're out like on the mountain or in the town. It's all very ASMR. You can happily zone out just to the sounds of the landscape and the hubbub of the locals. The art style is cel-shaded, so it's pretty clear and bold, which is nice. I've only played it on the Steam Deck in handheld so far, and whilst it all runs really smoothly, I would like to see it on a bigger screen at some point to really encourage my immersion. Imagine if it was in VR. That would be a treat. I don't think it is.
No, probably not.
No. That'd be so nice if it was. That'd be a lovely experience. I haven't completed the game yet. I put it down over Christmas. So I was playing it sort of in December, and I put it down basically when I picked up XENOBLADE. So maybe in a week or so, when I finish the XENOBLADE DLC, I'll return to Hinterberg.
Maybe in a day or so.
I was going to say tomorrow. It'd be really, really nice to return to Hinterberg to finish that adventure off, because it's just a really lovely, very cozy, very comforting game. It's I highly recommend it. It's a wonderful calling card for the country it's from as well. Delightful stuff. Really, really nice. What classic representation of Austrian culture have you played in gaming form, Chris?
Well, something again that just captures the essence of the nation. It's a fully Austrian developed game by a team called Purple Lamp, but it is a ground up remake of a previously not Austrian title back from 2003, because I've been playing SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated. First up, props to whoever came up with the Rehydrated moniker for a remake of an entry for this particular franchise. I think that's quite good. It's pretty solid. If nothing else, it shows that the marketing team were properly on board for this one.
Yeah.
Didn't need to put in the work, but someone did. The OG game apparently was pretty fondly remembered. It's a Mario 64 et al. Inspired collectathon 3D platformer starring the cast of Nickelodeon's SpongeBob SquarePants. So far, so PS2. But what seems to set this one apart for people at the time is that the game in its original incarnation seemed to have way more love and care poured into it than you'd usually expect from a licensed property. Like, almost all of the voice cast return for new lines. The visuals look about as close as you could get to the TV show, bearing in mind we're moving from 2D animation to polygon characters in a 3D world. Overall movement feels really good as well for a platform game. And so, fast forward almost 20 years to the game's surprise return by way of Purple Lamp. And although critically the game wasn't really met with the same fanfare of the original release, everything I'd read seemed to suggest that this was still a pretty good time in a genre that basically is pretty much dead for modern platforms. We've praised Astrobot a lot recently for being an excellent stage-based 3D platformer, but SpongeBob represents something a bit different in that it's more kind of like the open-world, objective-based platform action pioneered by someone like Mario 64, expands on in games like Jak and Daxter for the PS2. It is a different kind of split subgenre of that kind of 3D platformer. You wander around a small hub of Bikini Bottom, replete with the landmarks you'd expect to see from the show, and then you travel to separate open stages that, although still having a linear goal that usually ends in a boss battle or something like that, they're filled with distractions and collectibles and stub stages that really help to push out the walls of what could have been a pretty by-the-numbers run-and-jump affair. There's soft progression lock-in by way of later abilities and movement tech, rewarding revisits to earlier stages. Not quite Metroidvania, but, you're getting things that encourage going back to earlier stages, so soft a little bit maybe. There's character switching as well. That means you can sort of set your own difficulty by way of utilising Patrick's ability to throw objects or Sandy's ability to glide in the air over SpongeBob's more vanilla moveset. And it's all very nice. I actually really enjoyed playing it. Like, little is really changed from the original release as far as I could tell. Not that I played that one. But digging around, I did read that cut content was restored, certain voice lines were re-recorded with the original cast where necessary and possible, textures and models were all rebuilt and tweaked, and the game was obviously pushed to run at higher resolutions, higher frame rates, etc., to really future-proof it for audiences going forward. What made me decide to include this game as my Austrian entry, though, wasn't just Purple Lamp's focus and care in making sure the remake felt good to play for a modern audience while still remaining faithful to the original game, but how they've now become the de facto stewards for this style of SpongeBob game and are taking that forwards as kind of the new sort of keepers of the genre, keepers of the franchise. Although primarily a porting house in kind of their work previously, like they did the PC version of Sea of Thieves, apparently. They did the recent Epic Mickey remake that, again, seems to have reviewed quite well.
Rebrushed.
That, again, pretty good subtitle. But Purple Lamp would also go on to make their own mark on the SpongeBob franchise with Bikini Bottom's pseudo-sequel, The Cosmic Shake, that came out a year or two ago, as well as a yet unnamed third entry in this loose trilogy that's penciled in for 2025, so at some point this year. Licensed games used to be 10 a penny in the 90s and early 2000s, and quality was often very hit and miss, as games would have very short development times, rely on brand recognition primarily to cut through at retail. But as retail has moved from physical to digital and development costs have spiraled, licensed games are actually on the serious wane, with mobile apps and Fortnite-style crossover events now far more common, and probably more prominent than the shelf deluge of the PS2 era. It's just a different world, I guess. Purple Lamp, though, seems to be a developer that's been really keen to push a license they obviously have a lot of love for, to be the best it can be within a more modern games landscape. There are a lot of pretty subpar uses of the SpongeBob name in games. You know, you've got the very lazy Mario Kart Smash Bros. Aping Nickelodeon Kart Racers, Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl games. You know, they kind of pop to mind. But from what I've played of Battle for Bikini Bottom, Rehydrated, and what I've read of Cosmic Shake, these games are not shit. You know, they're really decent. And they're not pandering to a young audience. They're not skimping on the aesthetics or writing that's made the show and its movies such an enduring franchise. They're respectful, I guess, AA products. And I feel that tier of games absolutely has a place alongside indies, alongside AAA, and everything in between when done properly. So this is kind of just like a way of highlighting a sort of a genre that we would rarely bring up on a show like this, unless I'm playing an old like Game Boy Advance tie-in for some reason. But it's the type of stuff that existed a lot, doesn't so much anymore, but clearly is out there with certain people doing as much justice as they can to a license to make some quite cool and fun stuff. So it's the type of thing, it was in my Steam library already from a humble bundle at some point. I didn't pay full price for SpongeBob SquarePants, but I have had a really good time playing it, and I will probably play some more of it. So
well,
yeah,
there we go.
Austria,
How about that?
two pretty good games.
Ah, well done, Austria.
Oh,
Well done,
bloody hell.
Austria. Yeah. Do you want to know where we're going next?
Go on then.
Well,
Lay it on me.
I've decided to make like a faulty toy and send us to Taiwan.
Oh,
It's not a generalization joke, that, by the way. That was the original concept, actually, for Toy Story 2, by the way. All the Buzz Lightyears were going to be recalled, and then Woody et al. Were going to have to go to Taiwan to rescue their Buzz, which I would have loved to have seen.
I didn't know that. That's a little
Yeah.
factoid.
But there's some good games. There's not a huge amount, but there's some interesting stuff I've seen like on the list. There's at least 3 games.
Full stop.
There's at least 3 games, but there's 3 or 4 games that are on my sort of list of games to play. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to pick one of those to play.
Excited.
So there we go. Out of Austria into the Taiwan. That's what they say, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
Yep. We'll be there next month, 1st of March. Oh, that sounds warmer already, doesn't it?
It does.
Let the cool springy tendrils of March wrap your icy heart.
Bye.
Bye. Follow us on social media at O3C Games. Share our stuff, please. If you want to support us, you can do that as well. Go to o3c.games/support. Throw us a few quid. We'd love it. It would help. And have a good month. February.
Do it.
See.